Alright, so recently I saw someone asking on the chat about how to sculpt toes and fingers without it being stuck together, and I think lots of you guys will kind of encounter this problem, right? How do we sculpt such intricate, such close objects without it merging together, right? So typically I see a lot of this happening where you're just trying to sculpt in a way that separates out the things, but it's just too near, right? It's just too near, right? So you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to separate out all these details or to do them individually, right? So how do we get to do them individually? Now, let me introduce you to the secret. So this is just a something that I made earlier, but this is the real secret to the trick, right? Polygroups, right? Polygroups. Polygroups allow you to individually adjust each component as a separate entity without messing up all the other things. So that is how you actually, you know, have the workflow to sculpt fingers and toes and things like that, right? Polygroups is the secret. So how do we even get started doing a thing like this? How do we set this up, right? Most of the time, people will tend to sculpt using things like, let's see, snake hooks, right? When you're doing hands or feet, right? Most of the time you tend to turn on Sculptress and pull out your limbs, right? And then as you sculpt, you find it very, very challenging to do that, right? Extremely challenging to do it using this method, right? For me, typically I like to actually start with a good base mesh before I even start sculpting. So I typically do not start sculpting things like hands and feet straight on the model. I will typically make a separate Z tool to go, a separate file in fact, to go and just focus on the hands or the feet, right? You can bring those into your main files later. You can always bring it into your main file later. So I tend to sculpt them separate so as to be able to focus on what I'm doing, right? So let's clear this away. Right, let's clear this. Right. So usually when I start, I like to have a clean low resolution base mesh. Actually, it makes a lot of the workflow a lot easier. So if you look at the gloves that I made, right, at its lowest detail level, it's simply something that looks like this, right? It's something that looks like this. So how do we even make this in the first place? Of course, you can make it in Maya and import it in, or you can do it straight in Zbrush. Typically, I just build it straight in Zbrush using zmodeler, right? And I don't start with a cube like this. I will always initialize a cube, right, with 2, 2, 2 on the resolution, right? Makes it a lot easier to focus on the topology before you even start. Maybe not 2, maybe we can go for 1. Yeah, something like this. Something like this makes a very good start for the hand, right? Yeah, so we can do like this. Okay, this is way better, right? 4, 1, and 2. So we have something like this. Now, if you're not familiar with ZBrush, zmodeler, you can also simply just do it in Maya, right? But I like using zmodeler to do it. I find it a lot more convenient just to stay in one software, right? Another important thing to have is group by normals, right? Group by normals allows you to polygroup all the different faces by the normal. So anything that is more than 45 degrees turns into a separate polygroup, so that you can easily select your faces, right? Now, the reason why I work with extremely low polygon at the start is also so that I can select all my faces very easily, right? So if you want to find polygroups, it's under this bar, group by normals, right? You can see that I typically use my own custom setup down here. You can feel free to follow if you want, right? But okay, so let's start with the hand, right? I'm using zmodeler, so B, Z, and N for zmodeler, and I'm going to actually extrude out all these faces, right? I'm going to make the fingers, so I use I'm going to face mode or polygon mode, right? Extrude polygroup island, right? So polygroup island lets you select things by just like the polygroups, right? So right now I'm going to do the fingers and I'm extruding out this pink area, so it does something like this. Now, this is not exactly what I want. There's a little bit more things I need to do, right? So here I'm going to extrude polygroup island. Where is it? Oh, sorry, not extrude. I'm going to inset, right? Inset polygroup island, and it kind of does the same thing. It does this, right? It does this for you. And I'm going to inset polygroup island, inset each poly rather than the entire region. So here we can start to do our fingers. So you can see if I do it by polygon, each face becomes its own thing, right? Each polygon is its own area, right? And then I can extrude, or I'm going to transpose first. Transpose polygroup all. So it's polygroup transpose polygroup all allows me to transpose all of the same polygroup. So I'm going to pull out these fingers, right? Just a little bit. I'm going to do the same for back. Just extrude it out, stretch it out, right? Then we can do a thumb also. Extrude a single poly, right? Because I don't really need the whole thing. Perhaps we can scale the single poly so that we get the same type of knuckle. Right? Then you can transpose the single poly again and just bring it out. Alright. Again, if you're not familiar with the zmodeler, you can also just simply do this in Maya. Right? Nobody is nothing wrong with doing it in Maya. Right? Now I'm going to I kind of want to make this a square. Okay, never mind. I'll just do it normally. Slide edge. Alright, something like that. Okay. So we have our palm. We have our palm. Now we can actually go about doing the fingers. So I'm going to actually polygroup a single poly. I'm going to click this and not let go, and I'm going to press shift. Right? So that I actually eyedropper the color. I'm going to make this the same color. Now I can click this and it becomes this kind of purple as well. Right? So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faces that are purple. Now I can extrude, polygroup all. Right? And then all of these purple faces will be extruded. Right. I'll do this once. I'll do it again for the knuckle. Let's see. Then we'll do it again for the finger. And then the next knuckle. And then finally the end. Okay. I'm going to pull this out a bit more. Alright, just to make it proportionate. Alright. So now we have a very rudimentary hand. Alright. Now we have a very rudimentary low poly hand, but this is actually perfect. I'm going to adjust the thumb a bit. Let's scale it down a little bit. Maybe scale it down a little bit more. Yeah. Alright, so you can see we have something that kind of resembles a hand already. Right? Again, I'm going to group by normal. No, wait, do I need to do that? No, don't want to do that. Okay. Okay, I've decided to just add a little bit more detail here. Extrude, polygroup all. Make another one, right, for the ending of the wrist. Okay, yeah, this is perfect. Now I'm going to actually auto group everything. So the whole thing is now one big polygroup. Right. Adjust a little bit more of the vertices so it looks a little bit more natural. Yeah, so that it looks just a little bit more natural. Not it tends to look very odd. Alright, so at this stage, we've got our palm, we've got our 4 fingers. Now I'm going to polygroup and polyloop, right, the individual fingers. I'm going to separate them. So what it does is that you can see on my cursor there's a little yellow, there's a red border to show which face I'm selecting, but there's also a little yellow or orange arrow that tells me which direction the polyloop is going. So if you go this way, it's going to loop around this way. If you go up, it's going to loop around up. Right? So I just want to loop around this way. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. 5. And you can see because I'm working on very low poly, I'm able to select very easily the things I want. Then I'm going to polygroup the island, right? So polygroup island means any sort of floating island will be polygrouped as well. So I'm going to do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. So now that allows me to actually have the palm and the fingers as separate objects, right? Or as separate groups, so that I'm able to draw them or to sculpt them individually. Right now, to give myself even more control, when you click on the polygroup island, right? I'm doing the polygroup islands again. I'm going to click it once and hold it, and I'm going to tap on alternate. So that allows you to change the color, right? You can see polygroup island, alternate is a new, or shift is the pick, right? Shift meaning the color picker, or alternate means assign a new color. So I'm going to click it, then I'm going to tap alternate again. So I'm going to make each finger a different polygroup, right? So that way I have even more control of which finger I want to paint, right? So this is actually how I usually start a base mesh, right, for the hand. Okay, so now you may say this doesn't look very nice, or it doesn't really look much like a hand, but trust me, it's going to work out. So at this stage, this is where we can start sculpting. So I'm going to Control MD to give myself a level of subdivision, right? So typically I do not really recommend using Sculptress or Z-remesher at this stage, right? At the lowest polygon stage, this is as best as it gets already. You don't really need to use Z-remesher to do anything, right? This is what Z-remesher tries to do for you, but you just simply do it manually. So we have a hand like this. This is where we actually can start to subdivide, right? This is where we get to start sculpting the hand, okay? From the base mesh like this, right? So now we can kind of easily manipulate the hand. I'm going to just inflate the knuckles. So at this, when you start to use subdivisions, you can't really use sculptures. So you do need to get used to sculpting in low poly, right? It's a good skill to have anyway, to be able to sculpt in low poly. I also, you know, it's a good habit to focus on the big shapes first before you go into the details. So that's why I typically like to focus on the low poly, right? That way you get to focus on the forms, you get to not get distracted by too much detail, because I do notice that the newbies tend to sort of drown in detail, right? So doing it this way prevents you from drowning in details, right? Because what you want to do is you want to add some volume to the hand, right? Now maybe the fingers are all too stiff and you don't particularly like the look of it. You can also quickly make simple adjustments with the low poly forms, right? So this is something very powerful that I think a lot of newbies tend to not really understand, right? A lot of you guys are very excited to go into detailing and you don't really want to do like the low poly, right? But I tell you, the low poly is really important in your overall workflow. It lets you make changes very quickly, and you don't waste time, right? Once you start going into the details, you tend to, I call it drowning in details, right? I call it drowning in details. That's when you really go in too deep and you don't want to make changes, or any major change is very difficult, right? Any major change is very difficult. So at this low poly stage, I can still really just make my adjustments. I can really make my adjustments. Maybe we'll adjust the length of the fingers a little bit. We can adjust the fingers just a little bit so that they are not 100% the same. So you can see that it's way easier again to make your adjustments at this stage, right? To do your forms and your silhouette and to get it looking right before you put any details inside, right? We learned in school about the big, medium, and small shapes. This is what it means, right? We want to get the volumes and the silhouette right? And from this you can roughly kind of see what's happening. Right, you can kind of see what's happening. I'm going to give it a little bit more thickness. I'm going to actually inflate the whole thing a little bit so we got more volume. Right, so you can see it starts to really look more like a hand. Right, now we can still go up a subdivision, right? Because I didn't delete anything, right? And this is where we can start to go into the details. Maybe I'll give myself one more. So I'm at subdivision level 3 right now. Right. So if you find the wireframe and polygroups distracting, you can kind of turn it off actually. Right, and this is where you can start to sculpt. Right, so a lot of you guys are very excited about sculpting, right? And you don't really want to do like the setup properly, right? But doing this really will save you a lot of time. Okay, so we've got something that looks like this, right? And you can see that I'm able to adjust each finger individually, right? Without really messing up the other fingers. You see, because I've got the polygroups, I'm able to actually mask and select my fingers individually. Right, so this is the power of setting things up properly. So typically whenever I sculpt anything complicated, I'll spend some time to do the setup properly, right? Because further down the line, it really makes your life a lot easier. Right, you see my fingers are not merging. I'm able to select each finger individually and work on it the way I want. Right, so you can start to see the hand really starting to take shape. Right, and I'm not even going to the details yet. Right, I'm still refining the main silhouette. I'm still refining the main details of the hand. Right, and this technique, you don't just do hands with it. You can do feet, you can do body, you can do all sorts of very complicated things that are very near each other. You can even do like mechanical props or armor or whatever you want to do using this technique. Right, and I'm still able to, you see the parts are not merging. Even though they're touching, I can still select them individually, right, because I polygroup. If you want to select each polygroup individually, you press Ctrl and Shift, then you just press on the color that you want to select, and it will sort of hide everything else. Then if you want to bring it back, Ctrl and Shift, and then you press like outside the mesh, and you bring everything back in. So I can just click the purple, come back, click the blue, come back, click the green, come back, click the blue, come back, click the purple, come back, click palm, come back. Right, so I'm able to quickly swap between what I want to sculpt. Right, let's add one more subdivision level, so we're at level 4. You can turn this off. Right, so at subdivision level 4, right, that's when we can start to sculpt in a little bit more details. Right, and the good thing about subdivisions is that your base mesh is still there. You can still access it, and you can still kind of, if you make adjustments on the greater forms, right, on the more detailed parts, your low level subdivision will actually adjust itself to sort of follow as well. Okay, so don't worry that you need to adjust your base mesh. Your base mesh will automatically kind of adjust itself to match. Right, when you're sculpting things like this, you can't use Dynamesh and you can't use zmesher. You don't need to use zmesher because everything is correct. You can't use dynamesh because it will sort of destroy everything, right? So you simply exist in subdivision mode for this exercise. Okay. Right. And you can go as crazy as you need depending on what you want. So we're going to 5. We're going to start smoothing out details. Right. And I'm able to sculpt again without things sticking to each other because I can just select them individually. Right, so let's work on a finger part, a finger now. Let's see. Okay. Okay, start to really detail each finger, right, individually. So seeing it in a vacuum might look weird, so we can still just mask it, right? Invert the mask so we can see what we're doing overall, right? Now the polygroups is because of the polygroups that let me do this, so I'm masking by polygroups. In case you want to know how to do that, when you select a group, you press Control and you click outside the mesh to create a mask. You can Control and Shift to bring everything back in, and press Control and Shift to, or just Control and you tap outside the mesh to invert the mask, right? So you can quickly flip between the two. Right, just to see what you're doing. So we get a good sense of where everything is going to be. Not in a vacuum, because sometimes in a vacuum you may kind of get lost and things look weird. Right, really it's up to you at this stage what you want to do. Right. At this stage onwards, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? I'm just simply showing you the power of polygroups. One more thing, I'm quite a stickler for topology, so I do like things to flow properly. So if I'm sculpting the nails on the top part, right, I will want to do the same for the thumb as well, so that when we go into rigging, it makes a lot more sense. Right, don't worry, it looks a bit gnarly right now, right? But as we sculpt and we refine, it gets easier. It'll make more sense. Now, another thing that you can do at this stage, you can still polygroup stuff. So I'm going to, perhaps I should have done this just for the nails, then it will make a lot more sense. Right? So you can still revert back and do things like this. Right? I'm going to select all the nails, going to mask it. Then I'm just going to inflate it a bit. Right? This is a lot more neater way to do the nails. Alright. Then we can start to refine the rest of it, reshape it to what we want. Because of course, just like that doesn't really look correct, right? You want to do it properly. Right, of course, you can also just build it into the topology at the very start if you wanted to. I didn't, but you definitely can if you wanted to. I'm also using move topology a lot rather than move because I polygroup my objects. Right, I'm able to select them by their individual polygroups. So that's another useful thing to note. Right, but again, you see, it's actually pretty straightforward to sculpt things that are close to each other, like your fingers, and to sculpt like these sort of objects that are very near each other that typically you will find difficulty reaching those hard to reach areas. But if you group them properly, right, then really it's no issue at all. Right, so of course you take your time and do this. Right, you take your time and you sculpt all the details that you need for your hand. I'm going at this with like no reference because the main objective actually is to show you guys polygroups and the sculpt's not the main feature of this exercise today. Right, but just to show you. Of course, it'll take a lot more refinement to go and get it nicely, right? But you know, we just work on it a little bit at a time. Right? But yeah, you see, so you can get something somewhat reasonable like this in a short amount of time. Right? You can still adjust it overall. I'm using just a regular move brush now because I just want to start shaping things. Right? You can still make your adjustments it's quite forgiving this way, right? Yeah, something like that. Okay, so this is how you can, this is a technique that you can use to actually create things like hands, feet, mechanical parts, or anything that has a lot of detail that tends to typically stick together, right? And you don't want it to stick, you want to sculpt them with some separation, or you need some space to go and sculpt like underneath the arms or things like that. You can use this technique, right? So these are the hands, these are the self hands that I did earlier. You can see how I polygroup them, and I typically use the same type of base mesh, right? This one is a little bit more topology involved, but it's more or less the same thing, right? And then we can scrub up, and we get our hands, right? And again, I can access the fingers individually if I wanted to sculpt, right? Even though they are all like posed and stuff already, right? I can still really grab each finger and repose them the way I want without messing up anything else, right? Polygroups. Yeah, polygroups is the key. Sculpting from a good base mesh, right? A good base mesh, simple, right? Simplicity, right? You don't need too much stuff at this moment. All you want is the ability to separate your components, and then you're more or less good to go. Yeah? Cool. Thanks guys. See you in the next one. Bye.